Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Real Life Gaze podcast. I am Gareth.
And I am Lee. Welcome back, everybody.
And this week we are talking about non-binary, and we are joined by Max. Max, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How's everyone doing?
Oh, well, we can't complain.
All good, all good. I want to apologise. I do have a little bit of a sore throat, so I will soldier on through.
Yeah, I mean, we said this before we started recording, having a sore throat when we're doing a podcast probably isn't the best thing, but it's good we've got a guest now. So, Max, you're going to do all the talking. Is that okay?
Sure.
So, as always, guys, thank you for everyone's comments and feedback for all the previous episodes. The podcast is a huge success, and we're so grateful for everyone who's listening in and tuning in. Please remember to contact us, and for more information, visit reallifegaze.com. And as I said, we're on all the podcast platforms, as well as still uploading the podcast to our YouTube channel, which is just Real Life Gaze. And you can go back and watch all of our previous episodes. And Max was on one of our episodes in summer of 2021. Max and Ab joined us to discuss their gender identities and all about non-binary. So because it's such an important topic and still very much talked about just now in the media everywhere, it seems to be an ongoing debate. We felt it was the best time to get Max back on to discuss life as a non-binary person, if that's the right term. So could you just, Max, just give yourself a little introduction to our listener?
Amazing, yeah. So I'm Max. I use they, them, he, him, they, them, and a load of more different neo-pronouns. I'm at uni currently, so that's always interesting, pronouns-wise, so yeah.
So when you say your pronouns are they, them, and what did you say, Z?
They, them, yeah.
Is that the one that's XE?
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you decipher which pronoun you're going to be using? Do you just accept them all, or does it change daily?
Yeah, so my most common way of explaining which pronouns I use to people is to say that I use anything except she, her, or it, its.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't vibe with those ones particularly. So it just depends really what people want to use for me, what people feel comfortable using for me, but I do tend to prefer they, them, or they, them.
And are you biologically a female?
So I was assigned female at birth, yeah.
At birth, okay. And at what age did you realise that you didn't want to be classed as a she and her?
It's hard to pin it down. Hard to pin it down exactly. I've sort of known that something wasn't right and that I didn't feel like one of the girls since I was probably 6 or 7. But when I sort of realised, oh, I'm non-binary, there's a word for it, was probably 12 or 13.
Just to kind of go back to the start, see if we've got an old woman and they've never heard of non-binary and they don't know what you're talking about and they're very confused. Could you dumb it down for these people and just say, right, this is what this means, this is how I feel? Can you just kind of almost talk about non-binary for dummies? That sounds so disrespectful to the people listening, but you know, there are still a lot of people who just don't get it. Can you put it in complete simple terms?
Yeah, I can give a quick non-binary 101.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so non-binary is for people who aren't solely male or solely female, like in their gender expression and their gender identity. Obviously, gender identity is different from sex. It's not necessarily, it does happen that like most people who were born female are women and most people who were born male are men. But gender identity doesn't always align with that. So it's when people either sit in the middle and they feel both male and female, or they feel neither male or female, or some combination of that. People can also present very binary, so very either very male or very female, and still be non-binary. That's just presentation doesn't also mean that their gender matches their presentation either.
And what would you say is the biggest kind of, what would you say is the biggest argument against it?
We've all heard the I identify as an attack helicopter joke.
Yeah.
That is the biggest one that we get is, well, if you can identify as not male or not female, then I can identify as a dog. It's like, yeah, you can. You do you. I don't care. Like, yeah, I'd say the biggest bounce back we get is that's ridiculous. Anyone can identify as anything these days, and I don't get it. Is probably the biggest aspect.
Yeah.
I was just trying to recall the person. I think it was what's his name? Piers Morgan.
Yeah. Good old
Said
Pierce
something
Morgan.
On the lines of, I now identify as a toaster, or
A toaster.
something silly, whatever that was.
And when did you come out then as non-binary to your friends, family?
Yeah, so I came out online first. So I was out online from the age of 13. To friends and family, it took a little bit longer. I think I was probably 14, maybe 15 when that happened.
And forgive me for asking, but how old are you now?
I'm turning 20 this month.
20. So we're talking, 7 years ago, and then 6 years since your family and friends knew.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how did they actually react then, your family and friends initially? Were they supportive or?
Well, my friends got it straight away. They're amazing. My family was a little bit more difficult because I didn't really have the chance to come out to them. I was at a point where my parents were checking my phone every now and then to make sure that I wasn't getting up to any shenanigans online. And they came across my coming out post and were like, "Oh, what's this? Do you need to talk to us about something?" So that was a very different process. It probably took them until I was 16 or 17 to properly get it.
And do they get it now? Are they fully supportive now, or do they still have the struggles?
They still struggle here and there with the pronouns. They are getting a lot better at that. But yeah, they fully get it. They fully accepted my name change and everything. So
Well, that's good. But you said it took a few years, and I suppose you're talking 13, 14 years of your life as being known as one thing, especially a name change. Yeah. So I suppose you forgive them for the amount of time it's taken. The fact that they're trying is, of course, the main thing.
Yeah, my mum every now and then will catch herself and go, "They," and it's endearing at this point, honestly.
Well, that's good though. It's good. So with growing up and everything, did you experience any bullying growing up in school, for example?
Yeah. Especially primary school, oddly. Obviously, I didn't know I was non-binary at that point. That wasn't something that we were aware of as 6 and 7 year olds, but everyone can cotton on when something's different. Kids just kind of know. So I was always called, like, I got bullied a lot for being a lesbian because I was a masculine girl. So it was like mainly sort of homophobic bullying rather than being bullied for being non-binary, but it was because I was non-binary. And then once I came out, I got all of the stereotypical like transphobic comments at secondary school. They're like, "I'll just call you it because I don't know what you are," and all of this sort of thing. So
of course, yeah, you would have, because obviously when we were younger, us being in our 30s and 40s, non-binary wasn't a thing that we all knew about when we were in school. And you've been, 13 coming out at school, it's all new for us. So the fact that you still got bullied for that and that's quite hard to hear. But how did you cope with it? Did your school have a support group, or did you resort to going online for your support network?
Yeah, so luckily, as I came out pretty much, so I came out at school when I was in year 9, and that winter of year 9, they'd set up a gay straight alliance sort of situation called Equalistars, and that was great. I was the only non-binary kid there for a while, but it was nice to be with other people that sort of got it, because there was a couple of trans guys in the club as well who were like, "Yeah, totally get it, 100%. Here's some resources, have all of this." So it was really good.
Being in school and everything and growing up, how did you first hear about the term non-binary and then discover, actually, this is me? Because did you grow up thinking something just wasn't quite right? Did you then think you were maybe a lesbian, and then it wasn't until you saw something or heard something? Like, where did your information come from to get you to realize you're non-binary?
Yeah, so it was a lot of exploring. I was big on Tumblr as a kid. Like,
I know Tumblr.
Yeah.
Good old days.
That's sort of like the stereotype of non-binary people is, "Oh, it's all Tumblr genders." It's like, yeah, that it is a Tumblr gender, but that helped. And it's not just a Tumblr gender. So I found that through Tumblr, and then I found so many more people then on other apps that I was on. So Twitter, I was on a lot of like fan fiction sites, making friends on those. And we all sort of like came together to explore identities together, which was really fun. Because if someone then went, oh no, I am just a girl who's into girls, or oh no, I just like to present masculinely, that's all it is, I still want to be referred to as a woman. It was fine because we were in that space that was made for exploring. So no matter what it is that you ended up on, it was accepted.
Are you dating at the moment?
At the moment, no, I'm not. Well, not stereotypically anyway. I'm in a couple of like friendships that are more than friendships, but not quite relationships. So that's always fun.
And when Lee just said there, are you dating? What would you say your sexuality is then? Are you pan? Are you bisexual? Or what would you class that as?
I feel like I've gone through all of the labels. I've been bi, I've been pan, I've been polysexual, I've been everything. I just define as queer at the minute because it's the easiest sort of catch-all of not straight.
So basically, you don't. Would I be right in saying that you go for the person more so?
Yeah.
They're what they identify as.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And obviously, me and Lee, even Reese, when we were filming our last episode, we were all very scared and we're all nervous about misgendering yourself and Ab, who was on. And we were like, oh my gosh, it's so new to us. We don't want to upset anyone. What if I call her and by mistake? And what if she gets really offended? Or mean they, and we get really panicky about it. So how does it feel when you get misgendered now, especially when you tell people? Like, how does that make you feel? Do you get angry by it, or is it a case of as long as they're trying, it doesn't offend you? Like, how do you feel?
I think it depends a lot on like who it is who's doing it and whether they've known me in the past, like before I came out. Because I've had quite a few situations where I've gone into like say a uni class and gone, hi, I'm Max. You can refer to me as they, them, they, them, or he, him, because that's my like typical three that I introduce myself as. Any of those are fine. And then I'll still get a lecturer turn around and go, oh, but she said this. And I'm like, you didn't know me as a she. I don't look like a she because I get heat all the time off complete strangers. So that's like, it does feel a bit like I've made you aware of my pronouns. You never knew me as anything else. This feels a bit more personal, but then like with people who knew me before or people who I've never had the chance to tell my pronouns, I don't really mind it as much, as long as they correct themselves or like once I've made it clear. I don't really mind.
But when you were in school, did your teachers correctly gender or correctly use correct pronouns, or were they against it because it was still probably a relatively new thing for them?
Yeah, so in school, I didn't really change my pronouns with teachers until sixth form.
Okay.
But in sixth form, it was pretty plain sailing with the pronouns. But I remember before I'd change my pronouns with my teachers, I'd have teachers like just completely go off on me for like presenting even slightly not femalely. So they'd hear my friends referring to me as they and then make a point of using she, it felt like. I know I also had like a couple of teachers who made a point of correcting my uniform because we had a male and female uniform and I refused to wear either of them correctly because it was stupid. So they'd like make a point where it was literally just the colour of my trousers was wrong and they'd make a massive deal out of it.
With a pint.
Say, like when you were back at school, I remember when I was at school, like say if it was PE or doing sports or anything like that, the boys would be in one changing rooms, the girls would be in another. How did you cope with that and manage that? And were you supported by the teachers or not really?
Yeah, I was offered the chance to get changed in a neutral bathroom.
Oh, really?
Said neutral bathroom was a disabled toilet. But that was a bit tricky because my PE class had the same sort of timetable as the PE class in the year above me that had 4 trans guys in it. So there was 5 of us who all had to get changed in this one tiny neutral cubicle. So I just stuck to the girls' changing rooms because it was too many in one room. But they did try to accommodate that.
Well, at least that's something that they actually tried. There'd be a lot of schools, including mine back in the day, that just would not have even entertained it. So the fact that they wanted to try and do good for you, even though it didn't quite work out, is still applaudable, I suppose. So again, that leads on to the next question. And when you're out and about and you go in to try on some clothes, or you're needing to visit the restrooms, how do you then decipher which changing room to go in or which toilet to use? Do you go into the gents or do you go into the ladies when that's the only option they have?
Yeah. I think in this case, I'm lucky enough that I do have a hidden disability, because it means that I do end up using the disabled toilets more than anything if they're available. But yeah, it's for safety really for me. I just use the female toilets because at least it's a private cubicle most of the time. No one really cares when you're walking in and out.
That's true, and at least nowadays, especially like a lot of restaurants I've been in just recently, they've all got gender neutral cubicles, which I'm hoping going forward is better, and it's everyone does it. Because even as a gay man, I don't know about you, Lee, but me going into even just a gents toilet, I don't particularly feel 100% comfortable. I prefer having my own little cubicle. And I always thought when I was younger, how do the girls get cubicles and the boys don't? I don't like having to pee next to boys or wait in the cubicle and everyone thinks I'm doing a number 2 when I'm just peeing in private. So the fact that I go to some places and they've got gender neutral toilets and they're all individual locked doors, I'm like, it's bliss for me. I don't know about how you feel about that, Lee.
I think more nightclubs and whatnot. I know in Birmingham they're like gender neutral toilets. I think last time, I haven't been out in years, but like say in Nightingale's, I think they, from what I can recall, they have toilets that are just gender neutral.
Well, when I went out with Natasha in London, when I was there with Reese, we went into a nightclub and it was just one big open bathroom area, shall we call it, and there were just all cubicles, and it was men, women, non-binary, trans, anyone could go in and just shut the door. And it was just like a communal hand washing thing in the middle that everyone came out and then just washed their hands in this big round circle. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. It just felt safer in a way. I mean, there was someone there.
I was just about to say, I bet it does feel safer, because like, years ago, I would go out with, say, my straight female friends, and it might have just been 2 of us, them and me. And then if they was to go off in the toilet or me, and then you're leaving your other friend on their own. So yeah, I think it's possibly the way forward.
Well, I hope so. And that's just us, especially if you're non-binary. It probably feels even worse for you if, you're forced to choose one and you might not feel safe. So I think we're heading in the right direction in that aspect.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So to you then, we've mentioned all these different type of labels that you choose for yourself. So like going back, was it like a bit of a relief, like a bit of a weight lifted, where you actually thought, this is me. I feel like this. I feel like they, them, etc.
Yeah, it was definitely because when I first realised that there wasn't quite something right with my gender, I was thinking like, oh, I must just be a boy who was born in the wrong body. I must just be like fully trans, and I've got to be a man now and all of this. But that didn't feel right either. People like referring to me as, oh, you're a man, and referring to me only as he, him. It just wasn't right. So finding other people who also felt like that, of like, sure, I might like being referred to as binary terms sometimes, but not all the time. And there's a word for that, was like the biggest relief. Because I was like, I'm not just weird. There's a word for it.
That's exactly kind of what Brandy said in her asexuality episode, is finally having a box that you fit into makes you feel not alone. It gives you a place in the world, and it gives you a support group and network that you can then connect with.
Yeah, and having a word for it as well makes it feel more like official, of, oh,
it's a thing, you exist.
It's there.
Yeah, this is the thing. And the internet, we can slag off the internet till the cows come home. There's a lot of negativity on the internet, but for you, especially coming into your own, and it gave you the term non-binary. It's how you found out about it, and it gave you this support group that you would never have had without the internet. So it gets a bad name, the internet, but at the same time, it's saving a lot of people's lives because it's making such a huge difference with things like this.
Yeah, definitely. I sort of liken finding the word non-binary and realising that described me to when I got my autism diagnosis. That sort of feeling of, oh, there are others, and there's a word for this.
Yeah.
And it's great. There's a community.
Absolutely. And it's a big community as well. And this is what you always find whenever there's debates on, especially on Twitter, as toxic and minging as Twitter is, the non-binary, should I say alliance, or but there's a lot of support for them, and user a good support network that come together to fight your case. But I remember you saying in our last episode on YouTube that non-binary has been around for years. And a lot of people, their argument is, oh yeah, this is this new fad, this non-binary rubbish that's only been out for the last 5 years because of all these youngsters coming out on the internet and TikTok and making this a thing. But I remember you saying it's actually been around for a lot longer. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of historical documentation for people who didn't necessarily identify as either, especially in like non-Western cultures. So for Native American people, there's the Two-Spirit, and there's other related genders to that depending on the tribe. Then there's also, like, over in India, there's the Hijra. There's so many different different identities in different cultures that are non-binary. I was learning the other day about, I can't remember what the name was now. It was an ancient Egyptian royal anyway, and they were assigned female at birth, but always referred to themselves as male and wanted to be raised as male. So trans and non-binary people have been around since like ancient Egypt, and we've got documentation of that. And even like singular they pronouns, I know is something people don't really get, but Shakespeare was using them in the 1400s. So
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah.
People use it day to day without even realizing, like, oh, someone's dropped their credit card, let me give it back to them. Like,
oh, yeah. Because this is what my argument was before. And a lot of people's argument about it is you're asking people to change what they think is grammatically correct. Because if you say, my pronouns are they and them, you're like, but there's only one of you.
Yeah.
They are, refers to more than one. It's plural. And you're like, well, no, actually, the example you've just said, we've been doing it all our lives without even realizing it. And I forgot, yes, Shakespeare did use they a lot, referring to just a singular person. So yeah, take that, bitches.
I've actually noticed as well, when I'm writing, say, emails at work and I, since doing this show and talking about, and it being in my frontal mind like all the time, organising this show and things like that, I'm mindful of how I write emails now. If I'm talking about somebody and I'm emailing somebody, I would be saying, they instead of she or him. I'm saying they or them, and I think, don't get me wrong, because I wouldn't I would know their pronouns because I work with them or I care for them, etc. But I think it's maybe a little bit more respectful.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not to guess someone's pronoun.
Well, it's as well like John Lewis and other companies now have it on their name tags. My friend works at John Lewis and she is Natalie and it's got she, her. And there was this big hoo-ha, this is ridiculous, blah, blah. But why is it ridiculous? And I don't understand. If it doesn't harm anyone, what difference does it make to anyone if you're making someone's life easier and making someone feel included and not uncomfortable? What harm is it doing? It's actually helping someone. Why do you have an issue with it? This is what I'll never understand with people that have an issue with the world moving forward. Go with it or you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
You touching that on email. So on our signatures at work. So if you go back to like pre-email, so when you would write a letter, you would sign it off Mr. Lee Matthews Clark or Mrs. Smith Jones or whatever. But with ours, because it's like as soon as I open an email, my signature and whatnot is there. So it's just got my first name and my last name. It hasn't got Mr., Mrs. or whatever, anything like that. It's just got kind regards, Lee Matthews Clark. So I think it's a good thing. I mean, I've got in mine, he, him, in brackets next to mine. My organisation, I know other organisations have been proactive in saying, we want to share who we are. And then it is also inclusive of other people who their pronouns could be they, them, or whatever they choose to have.
Yep.
So it's like being supportive of it as well.
Yeah.
That's something I've been dealing with at uni at the minute, actually, is my pronouns are in my email signature. I've got a graphic that's made by the Students' Union specifically to have my pronouns in my email signature. And I've noticed slowly as I've been emailing my lecturers that they've been adding their pronouns to their signatures. And it's the
That's
smallest
good.
thing.
Yeah.
You're making waves, Max. You're making waves.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about that the titles before either. People are like, oh, but introducing your gender is unnecessary. I don't get it. But then they'll turn around and be like, I am Mrs. Smith, and it's like, there's your gender.
Yeah. They do it without thinking. Yeah, that's the thing. So I think what I find a lot of people struggle with is, obviously you've come on and said I'm they, them, he, him, and there's other people who are non-binary who are they, them. I think what people struggle with is the fact that there's, how many? I think last time I said there was a lot of pronouns now that people can use, and I think it's just overwhelming I hate using the word the normal people, but the vast majority of the population. Asking them to accept they, them is one thing, but asking them to accept, I think there was over 100 pronouns that people use now. I think that's what people struggle with, because they're just like, okay, that's when they're like, this is just getting a little bit intense and a little bit overwhelming. And in their words, ridiculous, because it almost cheapens people like yourself who just want to use they, them because they don't feel comfortable being he or she or whatever. So to then add all these other ones, you're like, where does it end? And do you know what I mean by that? Can you understand people's frustrations when it comes to how many there are?
Yeah, I totally get it, because it's asking people to expand their worldview. People don't like doing that. They've got used to the world being one way, and they don't like being told it's another way, as we've seen recently.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand the frustration, but also at the same time, it's like, if you can, as a child, accept that you may only know 5 words currently, but there's billions out there, I think that as an adult, you can accept that even though you thought there was only 2 or 3 pronouns, there is actually thousands. And also that pronouns aren't just necessarily like he, she, they, it, they, all of the other ones that I use. You also use you and I and we all of the time. They're also pronouns. So people who sit there like, I don't get this pronouns thing, it's like you use pronouns all of the time. There's just a lot.
Have you yourself ever been in a situation, sitting or standing across somebody, and you're unsure of what their pronouns are, and how would you approach that?
Yeah, I've been in that position definitely as well, having like a lot of non-binary friends. And honestly, the best way is to just ask. Some people will get a bit butthurt about being asked their pronouns, and that's completely understandable, because they think that they pass as the gender they want to be perceived as, and sometimes they don't really. But they'll forget it. Honestly,
but at the same time, though, they're like you say, gender and sex is completely different. So just because I look stereotypical like a man, I might not want to be identified as a man. I might want to be they. So they shouldn't really be getting offended because it goes against their whole argument then.
Yeah, I think it's more for like binary trans people who they put so much effort and go through like surgeries and medical treatment and all of this to look the way that they want to, and then they don't always get perceived the way they want to, and I can understand why that's a little bit painful.
Well, like Natasha said in our first interview with Miss Natasha from our trans episode on YouTube, she said when people came into her live shows on TikTok and Instagram, and the first thing they said was, what are your pronouns? She used to be like, oh, she used to get frustrated about it. She's like, and then she would have a cheeky comment. But now, fast forward over a year, she said now she thinks actually these people are being really respectful. A lot of times they're young people, and she's like, do you know, actually, I'm going to tell them my pronouns are she and her, and just move on from it. They're not being disrespectful. They're not being cheeky by being like, is that a man or a woman? Because that automatically where her mind went from going through what she went through when, growing up. So, it is a sign of respect, because you can't just assume what people are. I mean, people ask me, what are my pronouns? I'm not going to be like, how rude, I'm a he. I'm just not going to. I'll just happily be like, yeah, I'm he and him.
Yeah.
Simple. And move on.
I think TikTok's really helped with that, actually, because there's a lot of non-binary creators, especially like really popular ones.
And people, say, oh, but TikTok's created all these non-binaries. And you're like, no, TikTok's maybe made people aware that they're non-binary. The same way that people might go, oh, I'm actually gay. It's the awareness of it that's making people realize that, there's so many more people coming out as non-binary because they now know it's a thing.
Yeah. And Joey, the creator I was trying to think of, they look very stereotypically masculine out of necessity, because if they didn't look stereotypically masculine, they wouldn't be safe. So all the time they get people calling them he, him, and they're like, no, please just ask my pronouns before you assume or check my bio. They're in my bio.
Yeah. And like you say, if you correct someone and they're very apologetic and they make the effort to use the correct pronouns, great. If people slip up, as long as they respect it and are trying, you don't get offended. It's people who 100% just ignore it.
Oh, yeah.
That's when you're like, you're just being disrespectful now.
Yeah. Like, I've had people, when I turned around and gone, actually, would you mind using they, them for me? Turn around and go, no, I'm not going to do that. And then make a point of using my pronouns way more than they ever would. Well, not using my pronouns, but using pronouns for me more than they makes grammatical sense a lot of the time.
It's just been a dick.
Yeah. They're like, I care about gender, and then they'll use she like 5 times in a sentence when they really don't need to. Not gender, grammar.
Yeah. Oh no, and that's when you have a problem with it. It's just been, so rude. But again, there's lots of people, especially like what I said when you were on last time, that we were thinking about what we were saying, and that's not a bad thing. Just to think before we say what we're about to say in case we use the wrong pronouns, it's not a bad thing. If you're going to upset someone, then why would you do it? And if you're doing it on purpose and you're actually setting out to make that person feel wrong.
Yeah. One of the things we're taught is, like, first things we're taught as children is to think before we speak.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why people get offended when they're asked to do that as an adult.
Well, like you say, I think it's people just don't like change, and the world is changing. And, we've even just said this recently. 50 years ago, being gay was still illegal. 50 years it doesn't sound that long ago. It's crazy. So you have to go with the times. Like you say, non-binary people are not going anywhere. They're evolving because more and more people are realizing that's what they are. So either get on the train or you are going to be left behind. And more companies are realizing this is the way forward. And to make their staff feel accepted and included, they have to go with the times and include the pronouns on their email signatures, or just those little things they can do to make people feel included. Why people have an issue with that, I'll never know.
Yeah. Well, that's an example I've run into recently is with the government DBS system, because I work part-time in a school, so I've had to go through all of this background checking. And you can't put mix MX, the gender neutral title. And the reasoning they used for it was because it has to match your passport. My passport has mix on it. That isn't, you're allowed to put mix on your driving license and passport because both of mine do.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Suddenly the DBS system won't let you do that because it has to match what's on your passport.
So they've not updated their systems to match.
Yeah. So my DBS certificate has a different title on it to my passport and my driving license, even though they made a massive fuss about it not matching.
Really? So you're, instead of obviously Mr. and Miss, it's MX?
Yeah.
Okay. So it'd be MX in your surname. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know you can do that in your passport and driver's license.
Yeah. The only thing you can't change on it is that your gender marker still can't be neutral, but you can have a completely neutral title.
But that might come, though. That might come.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my passport says M for male, F for someone who is female. So he's saying that's what can't be changed at the moment.
Yeah. So at the minute, you need to leave that as M or F.
And it can't be blank?
Can't be blank.
No,
and would you prefer it to be N?
I'd prefer to I know a lot of countries have had it as X instead, so that it's
okay.
It makes it clear that it's a choice to have no gender on the passport.
Okay. This is going to be my question for you as well, because in the news recently, we spoke about this with Natasha about the Olympics debate, how there was a transgendered woman competing with obviously cisgendered women. How does it work then if you are non-binary in obviously a sport and event like the Olympics? How does that work currently? And because we don't know, and how would you like to see it improve?
Currently, there is no non-binary option unless it's a sport which has a mixed team. Like curling, I think, has mixed teams.
Well, there was one non-binary person for ice skating, I believe, this year. But that worked because, as you said, it's a couple's performance. And that's what I said. If they were on their own, where would they then go? Because it's categorized as right now male and female, isn't it?
Yeah. And I watched a really fascinating video on this actually earlier by Mia Mulder. She did a video on trans people in sports, and one of the solutions that has been proposed to gendered categories is, instead of having gendered categories, having levels the same way like football leagues do. So it's like the Football's League, obviously. I don't know enough about it.
Neither do we.
Neither do I.
I know it. I know there's a Premier League and a Champions League, and I know that there's like levels under that. But that's based on how well they perform. So one of the examples that was brought up was Michael Phelps with his abnormal wingspan, that being a biological advantage that's not related to his gender, but that puts him ahead of people in his category. And surely it's not fair for people in his category to have to compete against him. So it should be that he's in a category with people who can perform to his level. The same way then that people like Caster Semenya, who have been excluded from sports because of biological features that they can't change, can then still compete, but it's competing on the same level as, say, men who either have a low testosterone or just compete at the same level as them for some reason, or women who are in Caster Semenya's league because she's amazing. And there are other women who can compete to her level, and that would include non-binary people more easily then, because you're not doing gendered categories, you're doing performance-based categories.
I like that idea. I really like that idea, actually.
Yeah. So in one category, you could have males, females, non-gender, transgender, everyone, but it's their ability to do that particular sport. Yeah. And there could be different levels within that sport.
It would be based on either their training schedules or their muscle mass or their previous results in races. It could be all based on that. And then it makes everyone level, and that's the big argument just now, especially what happened in the swimming category at the Olympics, how that transgendered woman won, and everyone was saying, well, it's because it's a man. And there was, lots of debate about it from both sides, and they're saying they've got a biological advantage. So that would cancel out any argument if everyone is then judged based on their actual level. No, I like that idea. It would solve everyone's problems, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So touching on that then, and possibly things changing, what would you like to see happen in the future? What change? If you could wave a magic wand, top 3 things, what would you like to see happen in the future?
I think there's so many things. Obviously, like
top 3.
Top 5 if you need it.
Obviously, like, it would be amazing if gender was just removed from any document it doesn't need to be on, firstly, because it's like, why does the person who is letting me into this country need to know what's in my pants? Really? Why do people, like, say if I was pulled over because I was driving badly, why does that police officer need to know what's in my pants?
Yeah.
So that's like number 1 would be anything that doesn't need my gender on it does not have my gender on it. I'd say number 2 is so hard to pick. Yeah, people just not being a dick about pronouns, really. We're going for like the big goals. And number 3 is world peace. No.
Wouldn't we all like world peace, especially now?
Yeah, definitely now. Number 3 would definitely be like a lot more awareness of different genders, of the struggles that we go through. Because I know the struggles I've touched on here are quite surface level compared to like my friend who lives in Qatar who can't actually come out because he's going to be killed if he does. Like, just a lot more people having awareness of, the NHS waitlists currently for gender clinics are over 10 years. And also, and here are the countries in which we are not safe to go, not even on holiday. And also Texas is currently trying to look at children's genitals to make sure that they're not cheating in sports. Just awareness of that, because it doesn't even get news coverage.
No, oh my gosh. Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to play a couple of clips for you. And I want to just hear your thoughts. We have played one of them before. It's a well-known man called... Do you remember his name?
Ben Shapiro.
It's Ben Shapiro. He is always against anything that is non-heteronormative, shall we say. So I'm going to play a little clip here, and it's quite a relatively recent clip, so you might not have heard it, and I just want to see what you think. So here we go.
And the basic idea that male and female do not exist runs counter to all mammalian biology, all of it, not just human. Are we to suggest that gender and sex are different in walruses? How does this work exactly? Like, are they different in bears? Anytime you have all mammalian reproduction is rooted in the idea that there's a sexual dichotomy between male and female. To obscure that with all sorts of semantic word games about how you feel subjectively has no bearing on whether male and female are categories that exist. And if you're trying to define male and female with reference to any subjective category that cannot be identified by any metric whatsoever other than how you feel today, I challenge whether that is scientific or whether that is merely a self-perception that is being guided by a political agenda.
There we go. Thoughts,
I'd love to put him in a high school biology class. I really would.
Sounds lovely. Not.
Also a high school English class. I'd like to send him back to high school.
What he was basically saying is you can be a masculine girl and you can be an effeminate male, but that's it. You know, it's like how you feel shouldn't then be changed. You're either a biological woman or you're a biological man. Everything else is a personality trait. And by putting yourself in a non-binary category, it's allowing you not to find your personality, and it's giving you an ideology rather than a reality.
I'd just like to know how he's defining male and female here. Because if we're defining it on hormones, they can change. That they're not always at set levels, as proved by Castor Semenya. The same with chromosomes. They're not the same. People don't always get assigned their gender at birth based on their chromosomes. You can't define it based on physical features because people are born with irregular genitalia. You can't define it on puberty because people go through puberty so differently. Like, the example I use for this is one of my uncles cannot grow a beard. He just can't. He is probably the most naturally hairless male person I've ever seen in my life. But the rest of my family is so hairy. Like, how are we defining this?
He defines it as, like you said, if you're born with a penis or you're born with a vagina, you're male or female. There are some people, he said it's a very, very small percentage of people are born with anomalies, what's it called? Abnormalities or something, where you can have both. And he was like, and there's, ways to correct that, but which way you then correct it is another argument. But he said, if someone says to him that I am a male and I can be pregnant, he said, you need to be sectioned because, gender is non-negotiable in his eyes. It is biological based on your ability to reproduce. Because that's what he used, that example there. He was like, every other species apparently on this planet is male or female, and it's based on whether you are able to give birth or not.
I'd just like to mention cis women who are infertile. Like, the one thing Ben Shapiro fails to realise is all of these arbitrary lines he draws in the sand are completely uncategorizable. There will always be anomalies in every way he tries to define, and there is no way to completely exclude trans people from either group without acknowledging that your categories are flawed. It's like there are people who are biologically non-binary. That's how we work. And I love that he keeps drawing back to mammalian biology as well.
It
because
seems to be his
mammals
go-to
are
argument,
weird.
isn't it?
Oh yeah. Like we found more examples of intersexness, like abnormalities as he called it, in mammals than we did in any other creature.
Yeah, because am I right in saying there's some mammals where the male carries the child? I'm sure that's in some
Yep.
cases.
Seahorses do that.
Oh, I knew there was
Seahorse.
something. Right,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like also when he says mammalian biology, duck-billed platypi. It's really hard to say, and they're also mammals, and they lay eggs. So it doesn't. Mammalian as a category also doesn't make sense.
No.
It's really odd. I just had a quick Google while that clip was playing, actually, and intersex people are as common as ginger people. 1 to
Really?
2% of the population.
Hang on, only 1 to 2% of people are ginger.
Yep.
I did not know that.
So it'd be like someone saying, "Oh, you can't be ginger. You can only be blonde-haired or brown-haired.
I did not
You're an
know that.
abnormality."
We need to get you in a room with Ben Shapiro.
I would love 10 minutes in a room with Ben Shapiro.
Well, the next clip I'm going to play is from a YouTube channel called Gothics. Okay, and I'm just going to play you her YouTube video here. It's called "Non-Binary is an Ideology and It's BS." Okay, and this is just a little clip
Interesting.
from it. Here we go.
The other problem with the non-binary ideology is that it conditions people to be victims. Just the act of getting upset over someone misgendering you is a sign of emotional immaturity. While on the other hand, if you acknowledge the 7 billion people on this planet and realize how unrealistic it is to have everyone get along, let alone validate each other, that is a sign of emotional maturity because you accept reality. So, that being said, who cares what they label you as? Who cares? If it's not the wrong pronoun, if it's not misgendering you, it would be something else. It would be your weight. It would be your outfit. It would be your bad eyebrows. Because trust me, your girl has had bad eyebrows before. It would be something. You will always be a target to someone that just wants to be mean. It doesn't matter. So there really isn't a reason for you to put misgendering and wrong pronouns as more severe than someone simply saying, "You're fat and I hate your eyebrows." Okay?
Oh,
Okay. I
Wow.
have thoughts. Oh my god. Yeah. So her point about it's just going to be something, it's always going to be something. Would she say that, for example, to someone who's been in a wheelchair their entire life and is getting fed up of people calling them names for that? Would she say that to someone who's got, like, say Down syndrome, like something they're born with, that's a disability that affects the way they function? Would she tell them to stop getting upset that people are going to call them names because would they rather be called names for their Down syndrome than for their bad hair?
Yep.
Like, it's an intrinsic part of me that I can't change my gender, and that's why it hurts so much more when people are mean about it, because at least I can change my bad hair, and at least she has changed her bad eyebrows. Apparently I haven't seen her.
Oh, there was a photo. They were bad.
She can change that. I can't change my gender.
The video itself it's quite a it's about 14 minutes long, and as I said, it is titled "Non-Binary as an Ideology and It's BS." And a lot of her arguments, there's of course loads of comments, people against what she's saying. And someone said, "You can identify as a genius all you want, but you're still a moron." So a lot of people just say, educate yourself. What difference does it make? How is what I want you to identify me as affecting anybody? And what her argument was, well, it is. It's not allowing people to find their own personality. It's stopping them at that by just saying, "Oh, I'm just non-binary then," as opposed to finding what kind of personality they have as a binary gender. And she said that can have effects of people really finding themselves and creating a lot of mental health problems. That was her argument about it.
I disagree, clearly.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, don't think that people who are, well, they like to label themselves gender critical. Right morons is my label for them. But yeah, they like to make this argument of, oh, but you're limiting yourself, but they don't realize how much exploration goes into being not your gender, how much oftentimes like doubt and stress it causes knowing that there is something about you that is not fitting within the categories that you've been given. Like, it does take a lot of exploration. I know a lot of people who thought they were non-binary for a bit and then end up going, nope, I just present differently. I am my gender. I know so many people who've done that, but then at the same time, I know a lot of people who've gone, oh, I'm non-binary, and then gone, thank you for letting me explore my gender. I'm binary trans. And it's given them that room to really sit with their gender before they've made any decisions on like medical transition. It's given them that sort of stopping place to rest and to really get to know themselves before they've made any decisions that can affect them long term. So it's like, yes, it is a stopping place for a lot of people, but it does require a lot of expansive thinking. You really have to know yourself.
It's about individuality. It's not like one day, 1 minute you think one way, 1 minute you think the next. Like you've said, it's you've gone through a lot. You've gone through years of thinking, educating yourself, and then you finally had this realization, and it's like, oh, I'm here.
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing. Like what we were saying before, if we were taught about homosexuality in school, we would have realized what we were a lot younger, and it would have made our lives so much easier to know that we were not weird. We were not, different from everyone else, because what we are is a thing and there's a name for it. Do you know what I mean? And that's what, people are saying, oh, if it can't be taught in schools now, or it shouldn't be all over the social media because it's just encouraging people to jump onto this fad and become non-binary because it's the cool thing to do. You're like, no, it's not cool. It's given themselves a really difficult life to go put themselves through. Nobody chooses to be non-binary. Nobody chooses to be gay. You just are. And there's just a name for it now.
Well, if I hadn't been non-binary, I wouldn't have faced half the bullying that I have.
Yeah. Why would you choose it? Why would you choose it? And this is the thing, you either get on board with it and start respecting any type of queer person, or where they fall under the category, or you just get left behind and you just become an ignorant, discriminatory prick.
And as she was saying, like, about the mental health, it's any gay guy who grew up under Section 28 can tell you the amount of trauma that is caused by someone telling you that you are wrong and that your identity doesn't exist and that you're disgusting and bad. Like, that causes way more trauma than identifying as non-binary for a little bit ever will.
Yeah. And like you say, what harm is it doing to anyone? It's not. And they always go to the argument of, well, what is it teaching our kids? And I spoke to my sister about it, and yeah, again, like a lot of people, they don't quite understand it, but they'll respect it, especially if, her kids come in and say, oh, actually, I want to not be a she or her, I want to be them. You have to respect it, and why would it be more of an issue than it needs to be unless you make it one?
Yeah.
I mean, going back to schools and whatnot, like in schools, they talked about all the different types of religion and all the different history that's happened over the years. So why can't they talk a little bit more in depth about sexuality and identity in schools? Yeah.
I know my little sister said, actually, she's 14, so she's just starting her GCSEs, and they've talked about LGBT people in their RE class.
Brilliant.
And she was saying, like, a lot of the boys were just sitting there and laughing and making jokes and all of this, as teenage boys tend to do because they're pricks most of the time. Mm-hmm. And actually, she turned around and went, my sibling is non-binary and they are also queer, and they're a really nice person and they're way nicer than you're ever going to be. Mm-hmm. And like, making it real for them, like, no, these people do exist and they are people, because a lot of those kids have met me over the years.
Yeah.
You've just answered my question there, because we know the they, them, and the Z and the MX, but I was going to ask, what do your parents say? Do they say my child as opposed to my my son or daughter, and like you say, my sibling as opposed to my sister or brother. Is that what they do?
Well, my parents tend to skew towards more like my son, my
Okay.
boy, my kids, like that sort of way. But my sister's very good at like, you're my sibling.
I like that. How is the support of non-binary people within the LGBTQ plus community? Is there a lot of support for it, or do you actually get a lot of pushback from us?
I'd say it's an issue just with like trans people as a whole, is there's a lot of transphobia in specifically the LGB part of the community. You do find it a lot, especially like with lesbians, I'm finding at the minute, because they're sort of falling for the turf rhetoric of we need to protect our women's spaces. And obviously women's spaces are a massive part of cultural lesbianism, which is, I understand that completely, like they want their spaces, but they're falling for the turf feelings of no, they're trying to invade us, they're trying to make us not lesbians anymore, and all of this, which is a real shame, honestly, because some of my best friends are non-binary lesbians who then go into lesbian spaces and feel completely othered, which is a massive, massive shame. But we do get that it is improving, definitely. I find we've had a lot of discussions, especially online at the minute, about, say, gay men who use she, her pronouns and lesbians who use he, him pronouns, and using that as a sort of springing off board to talk about non-binary people and how we fit into very gendered sexualities. Because she, her gays and he, him lesbians were a massive part of our history, and no one can deny that. So it is quite a good jumping off point, and it's really improving.
Good. And finally then, if someone listening to this or anyone young, is realizing that they're non-binary or just want some more information about it, where could they go for information online?
Oh, I can list all of the normal charities. Stonewall, Mermaids, Gendered Intelligence are great. They're a Wales-based gender charity, but there's so much out there. There's support groups on Facebook. There's in-person support groups usually in areas as well. I know Birmingham LGBT Centre has a group for trans and non-binary youth. A lot of like trans pride groups are also willing to be reached out to. I know the Trans Pride Brighton founder, and they are lovely and they are always happy to talk to people. The same with, I can't remember what they're called. I think it's Trans Activism UK, and Felix Fern, who founded that, are also great places to get information.
We'll link to some of these as well if anyone listening wants more information. But there is a lot out there now, especially on social media, especially like stuff like you say, TikTok, Facebook. There's groups out there. So there should be no one out there alone going through any of these thoughts. There's definitely people out there to talk to. Yeah. Anything else you want to ask or add, Lee?
No. Thank you again for joining us. It's been really, really nice to speak to you again.
Yeah, and if you have any questions for Max and you're thinking, hang on, I still don't quite understand this, or I want to ask this question, just go into reallifegays.com and click on the contact us, get in touch with us, and we will pass it on to Max. Max, where can people find you if they want to reach out directly to you? Where can they find you online?
I am available on Twitter at Eat the Rich, and then Iero's in Frank Iero from My Chemical Romance. And I am also available on Instagram at Eat the Rich Art.
Well, before we go, we do this thing where we spin our wheel. So, Tiff, are you ready to spin that wheel?
Yes, hold on 1 second. Let me just slip into my little sparkly number. Okay, I'm ready now.
Sparkly this week. Okay, here we go.
I'm ready.
Spin the wheel. Okay, here we go. Oh, okay, so this week, would you rather be able to speak to animals, Dr. Dolittle style, as in properly communicate with them, or speak 10 foreign languages? Max, you're our guest. You first.
Ooh, that's a hard one.
It is.
It would be fascinating to know what's going on in my dog's head, because she looks at me so confused sometimes. But then also, like, speaking foreign languages would be amazing. So I think I'd have to go with speaking the foreign languages.
Why?
It'd be cool to just like be able to travel and talk to people locally and actually get like the local hotspots, because you can speak the language, so you don't have to rely like on touristy places.
Very true. Okay, Lee.
I would go for the animals. Literally, I would just love to, going around a zoo and just looking at the monkeys and the apes and then just having a conversation with them. And yeah, people will probably look at me weird, but, link in with a nice hunky vet and then I'll be able to help the animals.
Just think you'd be able to be a vet because you could be like, right, where's the pain? Tell me where the pain is. You wouldn't just have to guess. And also, you would just be able to know exactly what's going on in your pet's mind, like you said, Max. That would be really cool. For me, though, I'm going to agree with Max. I'd rather be able to speak 10 foreign languages because you could pick like the most obscure language, and then you can make so much money in a job if you can speak that language. Do you know what I mean? All these job advertisements that say preferably you speak 2 or 3 languages, you can go in and be like, actually, I'm fluent in 10 languages. You'd be on like 6 figures.
Well, we could buddy up because there's animals all over the world and I'm sure they all speak different languages.
A Spanish dog, yep.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay. Well, that was our non-binary episode. We hope it has been educational for you all. Again, we try and think of topics that, get people talking. If you do, again, want to reach out, get in touch with us on our socials at Real Life Gaze, or please keep visiting our website, reallifegaze.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Max. It's been really educational. We've loved it.
Thank you
For having me.
Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.